Hey everyone, welcome back to the Sam Podcast episode. Actually, there's no episode today. I'm your host, Brandon Sperry, joined by nobody. There's no co-host today either. Today's a little different. We're going to do a deck tech on my Tasigur the Golden Fang Villainous Wealth deck. He is also known as the Wealthy Banana Man. If you're not familiar with Tasigur the Golden Fang, he's a legendary creature, human shaman, with the mana cost of 5 and 1 black. He has the ability Delve. Each card you exile from your graveyard while casting the spell pays for 1 colorless. And you can pay 2 and 2 hybrid mana of green and blue. Put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard, then return a non-land card of an opponent's choice from your graveyard to your hand. He's a 4/5. Tasigur is really a great commander for Villainous Wealth because he's in all 3 colors, even though his casting cost only includes black, since he has blue and green in his text box. That allows him to have all 3 colors. And for Villainous Wealth, the casting cost is X, black, green, and blue, 1 of each. It's called Sultai, and this is a sorcery. Target opponent exiles the top X cards of their library. You may cast any number of non-land cards with converted mana cost X or less from among them without paying their mana costs. And quite honestly, this deck can get out of control with that because the idea is to ramp really big to cast something for X like 10 plus and just basically outvalue your opponent by taking all of their value and not letting them have it. So what I really want to do is I want to start off and kind of highlight a few cards of each type. I mean, the best one obviously being Villainous Wealth, because that's like our main goal in this deck, is to cast as many times as we can. But one of the newest additions to this deck personally is Unbound Flourishing from Modern Horizons. This is a enchantment that costs 2 green, 2 and 1 green. Whenever you cast a permanent spell with a mana cost that contains X, double the value of X. And then more importantly, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell or activate an ability, if that spell's mana cost or that ability's activation cost contains X, copy that spell or ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. So ultimately, this lets us Villainous Wealth 2 people. The great part about that is, at most of my EDH tables, and I'm sure most of yours as well, there's more than 2 people. So there's usually 3 or 4 of you guys playing, and the best part about this is you can pick the 2 biggest threats and essentially nullify both of them, and count on the fact that most people aren't going to be able to answer your board state after you take 2 people's decks. So one of the more important artifacts in this deck is Thought Vessel. Thought Vessel is 2 colorless for an artifact, and it says you have no maximum hand size and you can add 1 colorless to your mana pool. The idea with Thought Vessel is, in this deck in particular, you have a lot of ways to have a large hand size, and that comes from, things like Graveyard Recursion or Praetor's Councils or, any number of card draw spells. And the thing is, you want to be able to have access to everything at all times. And, your graveyard is a second extension of your hand, essentially, but, the best part is, being able to bring it all back to your hand and, redo everything that you've already done. Casting a Villainous Wealth for, the 3rd or 4th time can be backbreaking in some cases. One of our highlighted creatures for this deck is Gonti, Lord of Luxury. It costs 2 and 2 black for a legendary creature, Aether-born Rogue. He has Death Touch. When Gonti, Lord of Luxury, enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of target opponent's library, exile one of them face down, then put the rest of on the bottom of that library in a random order. As long as that card remains exiled, you may look at it, you may cast it, and you may spend mana as though it were any mana of any type to cast it, and it's a 2/3. The best thing about Gonti is it's essentially a mini Villainous Wealth, and we can pick anything that's not a land and take it away from our opponent. Being able to steal, any sort of answer. If you're playing any decks that have sort of top deck manipulation and they want to put something up top, you can make sure that they don't get that card, or you can put that card on the bottom, things like that. So Gonti really fits the theme of Villainous Wealth, but also his name being Lord of Luxury, it just kind of fits flavor wise too, which is kind of silly, but whatever. There's a lot of other important creatures in the deck, but we will get to that a little bit later. So what we will do, instead of going through the highlights, is go through each card and just kind of tell you like why it's important, what the overall goal is with the deck. Like we said, we want to cast Villainous Wealth as many times as possible, but there are some things that, you know, kind of help us out. And so let's start with enchantments first. We have a couple. There's only 5 in the deck. We've already covered Unbound Flourishing, but the other 4 are all key to the deck. Zendikar Resurgent, I won't go over mana cost for these. I'll just kind of give a brief recap of each card and then move on to the next one because there's 100 cards to get through. So Zendikar Resurgent is great because it allows us to tap our mana for double, essentially. In this deck, we really want to ramp big for X spells, so anything that we can do to double our mana early is great. Our next enchantment is Eldest Reborn, which allows us to kind of, you know, control the table a little bit. We have our opponents each have to sacrifice a creature or planeswalker, and then they have to discard, and then you get to bring a creature or a planeswalker back from any graveyard, and that just kind of fits the theme really well too. You know, we're just taking our opponent's stuff and not letting them have it. Rhystic Study, you know, did you pay the 1? Did you pay the 1? Did you pay the 1? It gets really annoying for sure, but it also provides a lot of card advantage for us, and that's something that we really need. We need to be able to find Villainous Wealth as quickly as possible. And one of the more important cards, I think, just in general, is Whip of Erebos. Gives all our creatures lifelink, so we don't have to worry about life being any sort of an issue. We have creatures that will suck our life out, and I'll get to those a little bit later, but the idea is that we don't need to worry about it because we have Whip of Erebos to take care of it. And then for whatever reason, if we do lose a creature that we need that's really important, then we can at least bring it back for a turn using the tap ability. So moving on to the artifacts, we've already discussed Thought Vessel, but most of our excuse me, most of our artifact section is just a, you know, ramp package, because again, ramp is so key to this deck. We have Soul Ring, which is, you know, it's a staple in Commander, and obviously like every deck runs it, and it's, you know, it's almost like an auto include. The next 4 are all basically the same thing. I have 2 signets and 2 lockets. I run the Golgari and Dimir signets, and I run the Dimir and Golgari lockets. These just help us add mana. In the case of the lockets, it lets us draw cards when we are flush with mana, because we get mana very quickly, and drawing cards is a lot more important, I think, after the mana. And the last artifact we have is Gilded Lotus. Just being able to tap for 3 mana of any color is huge. You know, it turns a 5x, you know, spell into 8, which, you know, makes it a lot better in most cases. Moving on to the creatures, we already talked about Gonti, but this is kind of like in the same vein. We have two creatures that are kind of like our tutors, and then we have a couple that are like recursion. And the idea is we want to have Sidisi, Undead Vizier, sacrifice one of our creatures that we don't need, and go fetch up to our Villainous Wealth, or, you know, whatever answer we may need in any situation, giving like the board state. Like maybe we've already cast Villainous Wealth, but the board's getting a little crazy and we need like a board wipe, so we can go tutor up that or whatever. Or maybe we just need to tutor up something to get Villainous Wealth back from the graveyard. And both Sidisi and Runescar will help us with that. And then a little bit of recursion from Archaeomancer and Eternal Witness. These allow us to return a card or an instant or sorcery from our graveyard, and the best way to go about that is usually to target Villainous Wealth. If we have Villainous Wealth, then most of the time our plan is rolling. Next, I want to talk about kind of like the ramp package for this deck, and I guess there's a slot here that we can definitely change, and that would be the Vodalian Arcanist. It's a decent body. It's a 1/3, and it taps for a colorless mana that helps you. You can only use it on instant or sorcery, so it's like, okay, that's cool ability, but it doesn't necessarily help. And in most cases, I haven't used the mana ability. It's been a sack outlet or, you know, something to chump block in whatever situation. The next couple of cards that we have on here are Cryptghast, Solemn Simulacrum, Elvish Rejuvenator, and Wood Elves. And in all of these cases, Cryptghast especially is the best ramp, I think, from a creature in this deck, because he doubles your swamps. And Solemn will help you fetch a land and help you draw a card, which is great. Elvish Rejuvenator and Wood Elves both get you lands, one being the top 5 and one is like going to fetch a forest. And of course we've already said that the ramp is a really big important part of the deck itself. Next we have kind of I don't know how I would call this. It's like our utility slot. It's kind of like things that we deal with for board wipes and such, and for the most part this prevents a lot of people attacking into us, or and you know, any sort of like board wipes or anything like that. We end up having Blood Artist, Zulaport Cutthroat, and Poison Tip Archer, and all 3 of these basically ping our opponents whenever a creature dies. It could be, you know, a board wipe such as like a Damnation or a you know, Wrath of God, or it can just be simple like anytime they swing in and we just chump block with a zombie or whatever, and that dies, and we can target an opponent or we can hit everybody, and it's a really great card. And we gain a little bit of life off of 2 of these cards. The next set of creatures in this little package is our removal, and these are all a little like different. We have Hostage Taker, which will steal an opponent's creature and then lets us recast it. It's a little, you know, flavor wise, like for Villainous Wealth, you know, we're stealing their stuff and we're casting it against them. The next 3, one is Ravenous Chupacabra, which I like to refer to as a sad puppy. Sad Puppy destroys a target creature an opponent controls, which is, you know, it's good spot removal. Acidic Slime, that'll destroy a target artifact, enchantment, or land. And then we have Reclamation Sage, which will hit a artifact or enchantment. So we're trying to cover the board like with removal. In most cases we want a board wipe, but in some cases we want to tutor these up just to take care of like problems. If somebody else gets a Zendikar Resurgent and they're trying to outramp us, we want to, you know, limit that, because we want their stuff, not them. And then the last creatures of the deck, I will say they're just beaters. We have Ripjaw Raptor, which he's got a little utility because whenever he's dealt damage he can draw a card, but he's a big body. He's a 4/5, and in most cases he's not gonna die whenever he's blocking something. Grave Titan, it's just one of my favorite cards, like in the EDH format in general. He comes in, he's a 6/6 Death Touch, and then he brings 2/2 zombies with him, and every time he attacks he gives 2 more zombies. So if this card stays on the board, like the value becomes immense, especially when we're trying to blow up everything with Blood Artist triggers and things like that. And finally, the probably the best utility card for finding Villainous Wealth is Doom Whisperer, and it's got a 6/6 body, it's flying trample, costs 5 to play, but it also has Surveil 2. You'll pay 2 life and look at the top 2 cards of your deck, and you can put them in the graveyard if you don't want them, or you can put them back in any order, whatever. Being able to dig in a 40 life format, like, you know, surveilling like 10 times doesn't hurt, because okay, you lost 20 life, but maybe we found our artifact that gains us the life back. You know, the Whip of Erebos it's a huge piece. Maybe we found our Villainous Wealth, which allows us to, you know, steal our opponent's best answers anyways, and like kind of dig ourselves out of that 20 life hole. It's a great piece for this deck, and since I'm such a big believer in life as a resource, like this is like the perfect card for this deck. Okay, so let's move on to instants and sorceries. Then I'm not going to touch on this like crazy. This is one of those things that this is really meta dependent, and for the most part, like my meta is pretty chill. We're really relaxed, and considering how crazy this deck can be, like you might consider it competitive. I wouldn't say it is. It's definitely built that way, but I don't really play that way. I've never been a competitive, you know, like I have to win this spiky type player. I do like to win, don't get me wrong, but I like people to have fun, and I also don't want to push anybody off and be like, oh, you're playing this deck again, sort of thing. But to that end, we don't run a lot of cancels in our play group because people like to play the game. So I only run 2, Devious Cover-Up and Sinister Sabotage. Both of these are ways to get Villainous Wealth either into my hand or back into my deck. And in a format where you want to cast the same card over and over again, but there's only one of that card, being able to return it or find it is key. In other metas, there might be more cancels. There might be, more responses to a Villainous Wealth, like especially a very large one. If you're casting Villainous Wealth for 30 and you're not holding up 3 mana to counter, it's, in most cases you're probably not going to get that off. So I do run the 2 just in case. There may be situations that somebody is running to cancel, and I definitely want to be prepared, but in most cases I'm not too worried about it. The next set of instants and sorceries are our recursion, and these are all kind of various power levels. Like, one of the most recent adds is from War of the Spark, and that's Finale of Revelation, and this card is just great in general. And I have to thank Ali Eldrazi for this one. He ran a deck on Arena, and he played like 2 copies of this card, and just watching it work in a big mana deck really helped me understand how this could help me in this deck. So essentially you draw X cards, and if X is 10 or more, then you shuffle your graveyard into your library, draw X cards, untap up to 5 lands, and you have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. So we cast Villainous Wealth, it's in the graveyard. This lets us shuffle it back in and get everything else that we used back into the deck, while also netting us 5 more land. And in most cases we're going to untap our Cabal Coffers sort of thing. That way we can just ramp into even bigger mana. And similarly along those lines is Praetor's Council, which allows us to bring our graveyard back to our hand and exile that card. We'll have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. So that's three no maximum hand size effects in this deck, and I think that's very important. Redundancy is key to me in EDH. Our next 3 are Reclaim, Recollect, and Call to Mind. Basically all of these things bring back a card from our graveyard, or it's their sorcery, and put it back into our deck or into our hand. Next part of the instance of sorceries are our tutors. Tutors are kind of hit or miss depending on your meta. You may run more tutors, you may run less tutors. In this deck I run 3 because I have a very specific goal, and that's to cast Villainous Wealth. So I run Demonic Tutor, Diabolic Intent, and Diabolic Tutor. All various mana costs. One you have to sacrifice creatures, some are just 2 drops, some are 4 drops, etc. But when you have a specific goal in mind, like I said, redundancy is key. So those 3 tutors plus our Runescar Demon gives us 4 tutors for Villainous Wealth. Next we have card draw, and card draw is just advantage, and advantage helps you win games. So we have 5 cards for card draw. We have Brainstorm, Chemist's Insight, Preordain, Harmonize, and Treasure Cruise. Drawing from 1 to 4 cards, 3 cards, excuse me. Just good value. Some have the Scry ability, which is nice because we can get rid of the things we don't need, put them on the bottom, and move forward with the deck and its plans. Next we have removal. We have Assassin's Trophy, Putrefy, Beast Within, and then on a more larger scale we have Damnation and Toxic Deluge. These cards are key, especially when we have Blood Artist or Poison Tip Archer or anything like that out. If we have all three of them, being able to board wipe and have 3 triggers off the same amount of creatures is insane. The next set of cards is our ramp package. Cultivate, Kodama's Reach, Sky Shroud Claim, Grow from the Ashes, Rampant Growth, Explore, which lets us draw a card also, but we get to play an additional land. It's pretty nice. One of the bigger ones is Collective Voyage. Starting with you can pay any amount into this card, and everybody else can join in. They can pay, X, whatever that cost is, and then everybody gets to go search for X basic lands and put them onto the battlefield. This can be a card that can help you and hurt you, but in most cases it's going to help us because we want to ramp big, and if they get their lands, that's okay, because then we plan on stealing their stuff anyways next turn. Next up are the Planeswalkers. These are cards that, depending on your play group or your experience and how you want to play the game, you may not even need these cards. I happen to have these cards from a long time. I've been playing for almost 10 years now, and one of these is like one of the very first Planeswalkers I've ever owned, and it just helps our package. But these are cards that you could definitely slot in or out as you see fit. I have 2 Vraskas. One is Golgari Queen, and the other is Relic Seeker. And then Garruk Wildspeaker is the last of the Planeswalkers. All of them help us with removal or ramp packages, and they're all very unique to the deck themselves. The last segment is going to be the lands, and this is going to be our key to the deck, obviously, because we need so many of them. First, we're going to start with kind of like our ramp lands, and those would be Myriad Landscape, Terramorphic Expanse, Evolving Wilds, Blighted Woodland, Cabal Coffers, Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. All of these help us get more lands or thin our deck out. In the case of Cabal Coffers and Urborg, that lets all of our lands become swamps, and then we can just tap for huge amounts of mana. And then, like I said earlier, if we have a Finale of Revelation, we can untap 5 lands and we could just dump X, even more mana into it. The next are kind of utility. We have Ash Barrens, we have Temple of the False God, we have Reliquary Tower, we have Field of Ruin, which allows us to destroy some land and fetch some others. Command Tower, all of these, they're like lands that tap for, colorless, or in Command Tower's case, like all colors. Reliquary Tower gives us no maximum hand size. These are all great. Talking about cards that could be slotted out, Temple of the False God is one of those cards. In most cases, it helps us. It definitely is a great card for this deck because it taps for 2, and we like mana. We need mana. We need ways to cast Villainous Wealth as big as possible. The added stipulation that it can only activate if you have 5 or more lands becomes the issue. I can't tell you how many times I've had this in my opening hand and I've questioned whether to keep it or mulligan, because it can be a dead card early, and our plan is to get out going as fast as possible. And if we're on 4 lands and one of them just happens to be Temple of the False God and we're just stuck on that, we don't get to cast anything with it. It's kind of a detriment to us. So it's kind of on the chopping block. I'm still going to keep playing it and, figure it out kind of going forward. The next set of lands are kind of the important ones, I guess. These are the 3-color land Opulent Palace, 2 dual color lands. We have Botanical Sanctum, Jungle Hollow, Dark Slick Shores, Overgrown Tomb, Sunken Hollow, Woodland Cemetery, Drowned Catacomb. These are all 2 colors, and in most cases they don't come in tapped. There are a couple of stipulations. Jungle Hollow does come in tapped, Opulent Palace does come in tapped. Some come in tapped if you have more than 2 lands, some come in tapped if you have less than 2, whatever, things like that. So those are the kind of whatever. This next section, this is definitely parts that, depending on budget, you don't have to run these cards. And for anybody that's listening, there are a lot of cards that I've listed off that could be worth money, and I don't want you to feel like you have to build the deck this way, or even like have to spend this kind of money. This is something that for me it's a kind of been a passion project for a long time, and I have spent a lot of time and a lot of effort, and a lot of the cards that I do acquire do go into this deck, and for the most part I feel like really happy with it. But I also want people to know that you don't have to spend this kind of money if you want to play this deck. You can definitely do it on a budget, and you can do it way cheaper than what you're about to hear. The next 3 lands that I have are the Auber Duels. These are all from Revised, or the 3rd edition. Underground Sea, Tropical Island, and Bayou. These are dual lands that tap for one of 2 colors, but they also have the subtype of forest, swamp, or island, which is great for when we're using cards to fetch forests or swamps or islands, etc. And the last bit is the basic lands. We have swamps, we have islands, and we have forests. And we have 5 swamps, 6 forests, and 3 islands. I use the Zendikar full arts because, 1, those are like the ones that I started with, and 2, like the island with the bowl floating with like the waterfall coming out, like this is like one of my favorite arts in Magic just in general. But it's also the same set that I kind of started with, like starting with the Eldrazi block, Zendikar block, excuse me. So that's the deck. Like we said, we kind of went over a couple things like during the deck tech itself that we could probably replace. I would say that the biggest card that I'm missing from this deck is Rift Sweeper. Rift Sweeper is a 1 in a green creature elf shaman. When Rift Sweeper enters the battlefield, choose target face-up exiled card. Its owner shuffles it into his or her library. This is a 2/2. Something that I didn't talk about is exile effects. If there's a way to exile a graveyard, Bojuka Bog comes to mind. Any other sort of, single card target removal, like, there's Relic of Progenitus, there's all of these, like, graveyard hate cards, Leyline of the Void, etc. Any of those cards in particular, if they are removing your Villainous Wealth, you need to get it back. Now, I haven't personally come into that. Like I said, we have a pretty casual play group, but this card is amazing in that, and it's in our colors. It's being a green card. Being able to bring a card back from exile is perfect, especially with Tasigur's ability. We don't really use it very often, and that's kind of like the beauty of this deck. Tasigur is just kind of in our colors, and he kind of fuels that fire, but we don't need Tasigur really in most cases. I've only cast him like a handful of times because I would use his ability in a very clutch situation, like I needed to pull something off type thing. So you can change the commander. You don't have to run Tasigur. For me, it's silly because like he's sitting on a throne with a bowl of bananas next to him, and I like silly things. I like creative artwork and things like that. And it's just a really fun deck. One of the, outside of Rift Sweeper, I think, there's plenty of other cards that you can slot in or out depending on like how you play. Like I said, I've got a couple of slots in here that I'm probably going to take Vodalian Arcanist out and swap it for Rift Sweeper because it just seems like a better choice in this deck for what I want to do. And then the obvious, like if somebody does decide to exile my Villainous Wealth, I would be really sad if we couldn't play it again. So I think that about wraps it up for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this. We're going to do a couple of these going forward. I think the next one on my docket is going to be a Niv Mizzet Reborn deck that I just built very recently, but I'm really excited about it. It's 5-color jank, but I enjoy doing fun, silly decks and stuff like that. So be on the lookout for that. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you want to chat with us, hit us on Twitter at SA Magicians. You can tweet at us using the hashtag Sam or the hashtag Sunday Afternoon Magicians. You can follow us on iTunes. Hopefully that's where you found us. Give us a comment, like, share, subscribe, whatever. One of the most important things you guys can do for us, though, is hit us with a 5-star rating. What that allows us to do is reach out to a bigger audience. We'll come up in searches better, things like that. And really, we just want to grow the show and bring everything that we can to the masses. Hopefully you guys enjoy our regular format. Hopefully you enjoy these deck techs. We'll kind of scatter these in and sprinkle them in, here and there during the coming weeks and months and things like that. I think that's everything for today. We really appreciate you guys listening. Thank you so much, and I look forward to catching you guys next week. Take it easy.